The Unraveler is here with me, Deconverted Man. We're here to talk about him and his journey to sanity from insanity, perhaps. I'm not really sure. He's got many things to offer. He's got a channel, he's got a book, he's got all sorts of things we're going to talk about. But let's start with the simple thing of, you know, uh, religious background, like growing up, what your parents or guardians had as religion around you, and what that experience was like. And welcome to the thing, Unraveler. If you want to say hi.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it. And you can call me the Unraveler. Just Alan is fine. That's just my screen name, as yours is too. So, but yes, it's great to meet you and be a part of this. So, thank you very much for having me. It's always nice to be able to get out a little bit more and get to know people and have other people get to know me. So, a little bit about me then, what you were just asking. Growing up, I was raised in a Christian home. My parents were very staunch Christians. The kind you don't miss Sunday, you don't miss Wednesday. You don't get to, go to basketball practice if it falls on Wednesday night. It's that strict. You have to be at church. If there's an event at church, you kind of go. So that was our family. You pray 3 times a day at the meals, minimum. And then, of course, at nighttime before you go to bed, I always saw my dad on his knees praying, before he fell asleep, reading the Bible every day, that kind of thing. So it was a very, very strict Christian upbringing. And
what denomination?
Well, growing up, it started out Slavic Church of Christ. It shares pretty much the same doctrine as the Church of Christ, but it's the Slavic version. So you don't just hear it in one language; you get to hear it in like 4 every sermon. so it's like it's like a line is said in one language, and then another person repeats it in a different language, and another person repeats it in English or whatever. So the sermon goes like that. And so, you have to preach shorter sermons because by virtue of the fact that it's being repeated 3 times or 4 times, it gets, pretty lengthy.
Wow.
So yeah, that was an interesting experience, but that didn't last too long. By the time I was a teenager, I'd say maybe even a little younger, we ended up at a Baptist church. So predominantly I was raised Baptist, although my dad's theology was very Church of Christ. He believed the baptism was an essential element of salvation and that stuff. So that was the denomination. Go ahead.
Yeah, the Church of Christ that I went to, the pastor had said many times that his father was dead and was in hell because his father had been a Baptist preacher and had been baptized the wrong way. And you had to be baptized full immersion. And I think it had to be said a certain way, like it couldn't be said this way, it had to be said this other way. I don't remember what the exact phrasing was. And if you didn't know that and you didn't do it that way and you didn't believe that that was the right way, then it didn't count and you were doomed to hell. And I was like, this is just wow.
Yeah.
So was that part of it, or?
Well, ironically, doesn't that take away the centrality of Christ and present the centrality of baptism to your salvation? It's very interesting. So, you have Christians themselves condemning other Christians that they're not going to heaven because they didn't do it this way.
Right. So was that present in that church? Because different Church of Christ might run differently. So,
I don't really recall because, like I said, I was too young to have much of a mind about it at that point to remember how strict that theology was. Although I will say that it was crucial that I got baptized in order to go to heaven. And my uncle was the pastor of the church, the Slavic church that I went to when I was young. And I remember the one thing that was true was I had to present the gospel a certain way in order for me to be allowed to be baptized. So the first time I wanted to become baptized, whatever I explained wasn't sufficient. And so I had to get saved like 3 times as a child because the first 2 didn't take, apparently. So the third one, I guess it took because I was able to explain my gospel narrative correctly, and he let me get baptized, which was good news because then I knew I was going to heaven. So I suppose in some way that was present, that baptism was essential, but I guess I only by recollection in thinking about some of the practices can I say that, but as far as whether they taught that strictly from the pulpit, I don't recall. But at any rate, yeah, then we ended up Baptist, and for the most part, that wasn't really an essential thing. Although, you know, there was always a fear of other denominations that didn't practice the same as the Baptists did, because even though it wasn't Slavic Church, even though it wasn't Church of Christ, it was still baptism was a symbol or a sign of your salvation. And those other churches that taught it was a sacrament, an essential for salvation, or that it was a mark of your salvation that, you know, God put upon you to make sure you were saved. However, the other that was taboo. You know, don't ever go that way, because that's evil. And then, of course, as I got older, I ended up Presbyterian, which freaked my family out completely. I was always running from wherever they were. I was going as far away as I could, not on purpose. It's just the more I studied, the more ridiculous Christianity was becoming. And every step along the way, there was another denomination that made a little bit more sense of it. And I think that's why so many denominations have developed, is because you get to a point where you're like, something's just really off about this. So you find a solution to that problem and you create a new denomination around it, thinking that it solved the problem. And then over time, you find that there's other problems that you didn't solve and you need another denomination. And eventually you just kind of get to a point where you're just like, what am I doing here? And you just realize the whole system's, you know, corrupt and doesn't make any sense. So
yeah, the you know, now we have the more modern churches that are being LGBT welcoming, and more progressive Christianity is what it's been termed. And so they have evolved to say, oh, everyone's welcome. I'm like, why not just change the Bible stuff? Because, like, you know, it's got so many, but they just reinterpret it. And it's like, okay, but just rewrite it. I mean, at this point, you might as well. But, you know, it's interesting to see this, you know, because they have to evolve or they die out.
No, so I agree. And in some ways, you know, on one side, it's like, oh, I'm glad they're being more accepting, even though, as far as I can read in the Bible, it's just a stretch to try to allow, you know, homosexuals into church or whatever. So I'm glad in that way, because, you know, ostracizing people just because they have a human right is absurd. But at the same time, I also wish they wouldn't, only because we'd save the LGBT community from being brainwashed and part of the mind virus, and at least they would be free. So you know, you can't win.
You know, well, there are a handful of so-called atheist churches or secular, you know, churches that are popping up. But I think that it seems to me that church, by and large, is dying out. People don't really want to go do that as much as, you know, it's online stuff now, and that's just cheaper and easier to do it that way. But, you know, there's a need for something in spirituality for maybe even for non-believers as well. So I'm not the one to make that, but, you know, somebody needs to make something. I don't know. But yeah, so you said studying. How did you go about studying the Bible or the history therein to change your mind on these different ideas?
I was moving from denomination to denomination, as you know, as I said earlier, because things just weren't adding up. And I was deeply embedded in the Bible because I firmly believed it was the Word of God. I had no question about that. It was embedded in me from childhood. So to me, that was just the foundation. No matter where you went, that's what mattered. You just have to know God through his word. So I would not quit studying the Bible, and it consistently led me through these denominations, and not just necessarily denominations, but certain viewpoints that may have not been denominations, but may have been unique, like new perspectives on Paul, for example, with N.T. Wright, or Auburn theology, stuff like that. And so I'd venture through, and as I would go through, it would make more sense, because I would study the Bible and I'd be like, man, something's not adding up with this passage. It's just not working. And then I'd study it and I'd come up with some interpretations, and I'd be like, oh, there's people out there seeing this. And so I'd be like, oh, N.T. Wright sees this too, cool. And I get in his stuff, and I'd be like, whoa, and he's blowing my mind. And then, like, you know, post-millennialism for example, became a big thing for me because as I started to see the time texts, it just things weren't adding up. And so I read, Sproul's book, and I read J. Stuart Russell's book, right, on the parousia. And so ended up a partial preterist, post-millennialist, which for those who don't know these terms, preterism is a word that means past fulfilled. It's a Latin word. And so rather than looking forward to certain events happening that the church predominantly looks forward to, preterists look back and say, hey, these events already took place at the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, because that's the timing that the Bible seemed to, put for itself. So, for example, in Matthew 24, where Jesus talks about the destruction of the temple, the stones falling in Jerusalem, not one stone being left upon another. And so that it's clearly a context of the destruction of Jerusalem. And he's talking about a coming of Christ, and I'm like, whoa, this has to have already happened. And so that's how I ended up in partial. But then over time, I started to realize, hey, even that's not solving the problem, because I couldn't find any more places where it talked about any future coming of Christ whatsoever, because all the texts in the Bible placed it in a limited time frame of the first century. And the audience relevance, for example, as Jesus was talking to people, Matthew 16, 27 and 28, for example, he says, some of you standing here will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. So you sit there, if you actually pause for a moment and ask questions as you're reading the Bible, you have to be like, wait a second, either those people are still alive today, which is an absurd thought, or Jesus came again in the first century before all of them died, because he said, some of you standing here won't die until you see me coming in my kingdom. So you're like, so then you start thinking, okay, that's the only sensible option. But then what do you do with all the cosmic language? And so that sends you on a goose trail. And then next thing you realize is, oh, cosmic language throughout the Bible is local instructions, local events. Stars falling from the sky isn't literal stars. It's about nations collapsing. So you start to put pieces together, and next thing you know, you're a full preterist, which is where I ended up, which means all of the future events that the church predominantly holds about the coming of Christ, the resurrection of the dead, and the final judgment, all of that ends up at the destruction of Jerusalem as a metaphoric or figurative thing that takes place in a spiritual realm, not physically and visibly. So that's where I ended up, as a Christian. And then you're like, you're so far from anything you ever grew up with, until you realize, wait a second, now there's problems with this, and then it just never ends, man. And then you wake up one day and you're just like, what am I doing? This is ridiculous.
So what was the book of Revelation then in that church or that denomination? Like, was that about King Nero, or is that because that's what I see it as?
Yes.
Or
exactly.
did they that's how they view it?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The beast,
they actually get it right.
Yeah. The beast would be Nero or Rome, depending on which beast you're talking about in Revelation.
Yeah.
But yes, the seven hills, all the language there that kind of points to Rome and the seven hills and all that. So you read the metaphoric language, and then again, you see that Israel or Jerusalem is being called Babylon, and that's not a new idea. That was a very Judaic concept. They would refer to what was once a good nation now as a bad nation, because it was fallen away from God, and so it would be destroyed. So things like that. So you start to compare scripture with scripture, and you realize this whole book isn't about the future; it's about the past. Yeah. So I mean, so it's like one of the things that I woke up to is there are no benefits to being a Christian, because everything is spiritual. There's nothing tangible that the Bible actually gives you, if in fact everything was fulfilled spiritually, and now we just live in this like invisible kingdom. And you're like, what is this? The only way you get to see any of it is after you die, and you hope you're right about it. Someone might say, oh yeah, there's a tangible benefit. You get fellowship at church. Well, I mean, okay, that's something you can do anywhere. You don't need a church for that. It's just created around a model of something called God, and you all believe the same thing, and you're brainwashed to believe it. So, you bond around this invisible being, but you can literally bond around anything, and have passion for it. So the church just does it well because it's been around for a long time. but neither might makes right, nor does time make right. So longevity doesn't mean that anything's right.
Yeah. So I mean, it seems like you literally just read the Bible enough to deconvert in a way. Like some people say, that's what made them an atheist is literally just reading the Bible, and so am I getting that wrong? That's kind of like what you're telling me.
Yep. No, you're absolutely right. I basically just, the more you understand the Bible, the more you realize how human it actually is. Like there's no way this thing's written by a divine being for so many reasons, but just seeing all the problems in it and how it doesn't actually fit when you really start to sit down and look at it to its fullest extent. And the fact that the church, by and large, does not see the time texts in the first century audience is mind blowing to me. Because I guess you have to have something hanging over people's heads in order to keep them in fear. If that's gone, then there's not much to hold them anymore. And I think that's what happened with me. And I think that's what's happening with a lot of full preterists, is that fear factor is disappearing because we're losing that future impending judgment. And so there's like nothing left to keep us in trepidation, So we're just like, what is this? Why am I still believing something that's just flat out absurd and is nothing but a mythology? Go ahead.
Yeah, did the different versions of the Bible matter to you at all, or did you were you kind of had all of them and looking at all the different ones at once, or how'd you kind of approach that?
So
NIV, American Standard, all that.
Yeah, the translations. My favorite at the time, probably always, has been New American Standard. I guess ESV would be my second favorite, and then maybe New King James, and then NIV, and I'd go down the line. And I know that predominantly most people use the NIV in Christianity because it's the easiest, although now they have all kinds of translations. Apparently there's one I just discovered called the y'all translation. It changes the word you and all and you all to the word to y'all versus you, so that people can know the difference between everybody versus one person. It's crazy what we have to do with the Bible. But most of the time when I was studying to develop an interpretation, I would use the original Greek, because I learned Greek in college, and so I would just study right out of the Greek and be able to develop interpretations, because I wanted to make sure I had the most accurate versions that we had. When I would preach, then I would use whatever version would make the most sense from the text, basically, is what I would do. Is, okay, NIV gets this verse the best, and so that's what I would preach from.
So, you grow up, various different types of Christianity, Baptist, and you become this other denomination. Then now, how do you go from there to becoming a pastor?
Becoming a pastor happened because of full preterism. Full preterism is not an accepted view in Christianity by and large. Of course, full preterist Christians would say it's an accepted view in Christianity, but we're the only ones who would think that. Most Christians would say, no, that's a heresy, and it goes beyond what the Bible teaches, and it's against the history of the church, because there are no creeds or confessions that place anything in the past, as far as the coming of Christ and the resurrection. That's all still future. So as long as that was the case, it was considered a heresy. So when I lost my job, I was a youth pastor of a Presbyterian church when I became a full preterist. And so I could no longer pastor at that church because of my view. I also wasn't allowed to finish my seminary degree because of that view. Seminary would not allow me to finish 7 classes is all I had left, and they booted me. That was Reformed Theological Seminary. Yeah, crazy. And the funny thing is, as you're in that state, you're challenging anybody in their position. You're saying, hey, give me a chance to defend my position, or let's debate this in front of the congregation and let them decide. They will not allow it, because they know full well that they can't defend their position. But at any rate, I got the boot, wasn't allowed to be there anymore. It was a messy situation. And I write about some of this in my book. So if anybody's interested, you can read a lot of the stuff that fills the gaps in what I'm talking about here. But at that point, I didn't know what I was going to do, because I had been nothing but a pastor my whole life. This is what I know. It's what I studied for. I mean, everything I ever did was for this direction. So I planted my own church, and that's where I went from there. So I had my own church for about 10 years as a full preterist pastor. Before my life basically just fell apart. Initially, not because of realizing this was not real, but I got divorced, had to close down my church, a whole messy situation that I don't like to even talk about anymore because it's so old news and it's not a pretty time in my life. But at any rate, that all happened, and then that's when I became an atheist. It was a couple years later though, because I was going through therapy and healing and trying to replant. I was thinking about starting another church. I was really wanting to be a pastor. Like that was still all I ever wanted to do. And I just believed God was putting me through something hard in my life because he wanted to teach me how to love him more. And so I was striving hard to find him again, to feel his presence. I was really working hard to know him, going to counselors and therapists and Christian pastors and Christian therapists and pastors. And I would go on prayer walks every day, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day, prayer jogs, whatever. And then one of those days, as I was out walking, I was praying, and I just stopped mid prayer because it just got to a point where I was like, what am I doing? There's nobody out there. Nobody's talking to me. And as I thought through the rest of my life, I was like, every step along the way was me having to do all the work, to make anything happen. There was just nobody actually there. And I finally was like, because I had asked God, if you're really there, reveal yourself to me. And if you're not, then just, I'll just know. And then that's what happened. I just stopped mid prayer and I was like, literally said to myself, I think I'm an atheist. And that was the end of it for me. It was that easy. I just literally walked away after 42 years. Just that day, walking away from my parents. I was living with my parents at the time because, like I said, I was in a depression and was just coming out of it and healing and ready to move on with my life. But yeah, so I was walking out of their driveway, and that was the last day for me. It was just like that. I just deconverted.
Wow.
And I think it was because of all the, like I said, all the steps along the way. It was like that last card was hanging on, and once that was gone, the whole house of cards.
Yeah, it's like Langston Hughes's Salvation essay, where he's waiting for Jesus to come, and then Jesus doesn't come, and so it's like, well, that's that, and so with God, you have this ultimate parasocial relationship where it's a one-way deal. You never hear anything back. Yeah. Although some people say, well, I felt this or I felt that, or some people even say, oh, I heard stuff, and it's like, okay. Right. It's got to be awfully hard to start a church from scratch, especially one that's off-brand. I mean, that's pretty impressive to me. I mean, I don't have any idea how you'd go about that. And then leading it for such a long time, and then eventually, what happens when the pastor leaves? Does somebody else take over? Does it just dissipate into nothingness? What was all that about?
So the quick answer as far as dissipation is nobody did take over in my case. It was, even after 10 years, I had an associate pastor, a children's director, / secretary, had a great congregation, had elders, the whole 9 yards, but it wasn't at a place yet where anybody felt adequate and strong enoughly equipped to take over. Because I know a lot of people there wanted it to hang on and then give me time to come back around and pastor the church again. But things it was just a really, really bad situation. It was not a good place. So because there was no one to hang it, it was either going to die slowly, which I foresaw happening, or I was just going to end it at its pinnacle, so to speak, and let's just call it a day. And that's what we did. And everybody and all the leadership agreed. They said, yeah, let's just end this. So that's what we did. As far as starting a church, that's definitely not easy. So that's not easy physically. But closing it's not easy emotionally. Boy, that was painful. Very, very painful.
I mean, I'd imagine. I've seen a church that had split over stringed instruments. Because one version they were like, oh, you can't do stringed instruments. The other people is like, no, you can use them, and they split from the church that was like maybe 20 people to 10 people, and so it was dying. And I also saw a church where everyone there except for one guy and me were over 50, so they were literally dying out. The pastor's like, I don't know, 80 something million years old, whatever, and nobody wants to come because it's not interesting. It's so boring and dull. And I was just like, and so I was like, wow, this is sad. And I went to a church that tried to grow its members and split two different study groups so they could make room for more people. And there was just then it was like I after I had left, I'd heard that the pastor's dad or the pastor's wife's dad, I forget which, had died, and then that was the end of that. They just said, that's it, and it just died out. And I was like, what happens to all those people? Where do they go? Do you think anyone or has anyone from your old congregation that they know about your deconversions, and if so, did you have any contact with them? Or
some of them know. At least I know some of them know. I've sent an email, to let them know that I've written the book, and not sure how many of them are interested in hearing anything from me now as an atheist. Unfortunately, I think I did my job pretty well as a pastor, so I don't know that they're really that interested in hearing what I have to say. Either that, or with closing down the church and all the things that went down, that probably also didn't make them very happy with me. So I lost a lot of friends. I lost a lot of good people in my life. Some because of deconversion, some for other reasons. So that it's a dark back look of my life. I'm glad to be out of that, and I'm glad to be healed, and I'm glad to be in a much better place. Got a new wife, a couple of stepkids. Don't have a church, which is one of the best things ever now. I don't go to church. I don't have to wake up on Sunday morning. I didn't do anything. Instead of church this morning, I was shoveling snow outside because it was a heavy snowfall the last 2 days here in Pennsylvania, eastern Pennsylvania, near Philly. So I miss my church was in Florida, so I miss Florida. But I only moved up north because I had to spend time with my parents to get myself back on track. And then I met this girl, and here I am stuck now, in Pennsylvania. But anyway, I think we got off track. But I think earlier you were asking about how to start a church. So as it turns out, there is no Holy Spirit empowering you to get a church off the ground. There's never any assistance from God. It's go figure, right? You pray, but then you have to do everything to make it happen. So as it turned out, I went to church planning school and seminars sort of with some church gurus that had church planted many churches. And I came to find out the whole thing is completely and utterly based on marketing and timing and when you launch, how you launch. You use the same model as launching a restaurant. You do 6 preview services, and then you do a launch date. And it's insane how much marketing and publicity goes into having to grow a church. There literally is no Holy Spirit working. I can vouch for that 100%. There's nothing going on there.
Hey, come to the church. Knock, knock, knock.
Yeah, some people
mailing out stuff, not all that. Yeah.
Some people are just really charismatic and good leadership skills, good marketers, and they just know how to get people to listen and follow and be a part of their thing. And that's how some of these churches just blow up. And when you know how to organize like that and make people do things, you can blow up anything. By that I don't mean like a terrorist. I mean the other way. Explode it, like make it good, make it great.
Yeah, right.
So I loved hearing from some of these guys, these church planters, because I was like, man, if they can do it, maybe I can too. And so I of course had full preterism against me, so that was a challenge, because every time somebody would come, they'd eventually find out you're a full preterist church, and they'd be like, oh, I can't be here,
Yeah, I've never even heard of it, or if I had, I don't remember. But yeah, I've never heard of the denomination at all.
It's not really a denomination,
or
much as it but
doctrine.
Yeah, it's a doctrine. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Although it should be a denomination, honestly.
Yeah.
It's big enough now that it should hold as a denomination, I think.
Yeah.
But it's not acceptable to the church.
Funny
thing is, baptism requirement in the Church of Christ is acceptable, but not preterism. Good, God forbid. But it is what it is. But starting a church was hard. Closing it was hard for two different reasons. But yeah, I literally feel like I've lived two entirely different lives, man. I mean, that old dude is gone. Like Alan the Christian, like died that day, man. There was just everything about my past is like a fog to me now, man. It's hard for me to even grasp the fact that I used to be a Christian. That I used to live by faith, man. Like believing in things that I have no reason to believe in. Like no evidence, nothing to verify it. It's literally the entire method of the supernatural is based on faith. Like that's entirely it. And I'm not that kind of guy. Like I'm a very reasonable guy and like to reason. But when you're stuck in that matrix of faith and you think that it's real from birth, you think you're reasoning, but you're only reasoning in these parameters, right? Until you finally break out of that mold, and then you're like, "What was I doing?" So yeah. So anyway, so sometimes
it's only when you're not in it that you see the insanity of it, and it, I mean, you call yourself the Unraveler, and of course there's deconstruction and deconversion. Of course, that's my title that I like. And I think I found your channel because I was looking up something deconverted, whatever, and found you. I was like, oh, this is interesting. Yeah, this is kind of my thing, So yeah. And you mentioned your book, so we gotta talk about that if I can get it up there. So I love the name of this, How to Kill God the Easy Way, as opposed to the difficult way, or So how do you kill God? What's this book about? Tell me about it.
Sure. So there's a little history to the title. One of the reasons I think my final blow for deconversion, how it happened to me, was I used to. Okay, so years ago, I'd say now probably 20 years ago, I was a smoker, cigarettes, right? Heavy smoker. And this will connect, I promise. I feel like I'm going on a rapid show, but this will connect.
That's all right. Take your time.
And I was a heavy smoker. And then after about 10 years of smoking, I wanted to quit. But as with most addictions, and smokers will tell you, it's not that easy. It's really hard to quit smoking when you just like put in the white knuckling effort. I'm just going to stop today. And you put them down. You're like, I quit. And, within hours, you're just like, you're convulsing because you can't stop. Like all you could think about is the cigarette. And you're like spending every waking moment just wishing you could smoke a cigarette. And so it was a battle back and forth, smoking, non-smoking. And my ex-wife came across this book called Alan Carr's Easy Way to Stop Smoking. She heard about it through a friend who quit drinking using Alan Carr's Easy Way to Stop Drinking. But he said, hey, there's a book called Alan Carr's Easy Way to Stop Smoking. She's like, well, why don't I try it? Apparently, according to the promotions, millions of people have stopped smoking, stopped drinking easily through it. And she's like, well, here, check it out. I'm like, all right. So I read it. Man, just like it promised. When you're done, I literally just like couldn't smoke anymore. That's what it did to me. Like I literally couldn't even think about smoking. It was disgusting. Like it just no more cravings. Instantaneously, it was like that. When you turn that last page of the book, like that, you're just done. And there's no interest whatsoever. It was amazing. It was like magic. And the reason it worked is because it's a deprogramming book. It psychologically removes all of your desires to smoke because it removes all of the all of the lies that made you think you needed this substance. Whenever you want it, it's because you think you need it. And as it turns out, it's not hard to not do what you don't want to do. So what it required was a removal of the brainwashing that made me think I loved smoking. That's what this book does. And so like it's like magic. Once that brainwashing is removed, you're like, what am I doing? This is stupid. I don't want this. All right. So now fast forward, church is closed down, got divorced, depressed, in my parents' house, moving out of my depression. But during that process of being depressed, I'm working for the United States Postal Service at that point, and I still am to this day. My coworkers, I was becoming good friends with, they would go out and smoke. So I went out with them to hang out, and one of them offered me a cigarette. Well, here I am. I don't care about my life at this point. I'm so depressed. Nothing matters, blah, blah, blah. Like, sure, what the hell? I don't care. So I smoke. Next thing you know, I'm addicted to smoking again. No. So now I'm out of my depression. This is like 2 years later. I'm out of my depression. 2 years later, after I started smoking again. 2 years now I've been smoking, and I want to quit again. I've now met Ray, my wife, now my wife and her 2 kids. And I'm like, I don't want this in their life. I know it doesn't do good for me. I'm in a healthy place now mentally. So I'm just like, all right, I really just don't want to do smoking anymore. But like before, somehow that brainwashing crept back in, and I believed I loved smoking again. And man, you wouldn't believe, I tried to read that book and it wouldn't work. And I read it again and it wouldn't work, and again, and it wouldn't work. I think I read it like 15 times at that time and it wouldn't work. What the heck am I going to do? So I contacted the company and asked them, and they explained to me one of the reasons it's not working is because, kind of like watching a movie that has a surprise ending, like The Sixth Sense, for example, once you know the ending, it kind of loses its magic, kind of loses that feel at the end that you're like, what? So she said it's kind of like that. So they offer courses that you can take. They're like $400, I think, for the course online with somebody talking or whatever. And so you sit in a group of people virtually and you take this course. But I'll tell you right now, man, 400 is worth it because, I'm spending $2,000 on cigarettes a year. I'm like, $4,000, I guess. Well, I don't even know what I remember now, but it's a lot of money you spend on cigarettes when you're smoking a lot. And so it's like, I'd rather pay that and just be done with it. But they offer 100% money back guarantee. I know this is becoming an Alan Carr's Easy Way promotion, but hell, if it is, great. If I can free some people from other addictions, wonderful. But anyway, so I take the course, 100% money back guarantee. I take it, I go 3 times. Doesn't work. Still can't quit. My gosh, man. But I'm getting close, right? Because now I'm quitting for like a week or 2 at a time before the cravings hit. And I'm like, okay, something, I don't know what's happening here, but like, so let me just read the book again and again and again. I think I read the book 25 times, somewhere around there. No exaggeration. That's a lot of times to read one book. But I was so desperate to stop smoking and not live with the cravings. See, that's the kicker. Like, if I have to live with cravings the rest of my life, well, I'm just going to do it then. Like, I don't want to suffer like that. That's just dumb. So I might as well smoke rather than suffer from cravings. So I was like, if I'm going to quit, it's got to be the right way. I got to get rid of it. Anyway, somewhere along that line, it finally worked. Something triggered with me. I'm driving down the road. I'm smoking a cigarette. I had this vision in my head. Like, I'm just imagining my jail keeper holding me in prison. It's a big cigarette guy, with arm. And he's like, I'm going to go into this Coliseum and I'm supposed to fight him. And the only way I can ever win is if I literally just walk away and never look back. That's how I would win. Because the only way he traps me is by me trying to fight him. And if I fight him, I can't win because he always puts me back in prison. So that's what happened. I just imagined myself walking away, threw that cigarette out the window. And since that day, I tell you right now, I've had no more cravings. It's gone. And I'm so happy. Now, here's where this all connects again. This wasn't a cigarette promotion, although I hope it did work for people. And they're like, oh my gosh, I want to quit too. Great. Go get the book. It works. But here's where it connects to How to Kill God the Easy Way. Because while I was doing that deconversion of the brainwashing from smoking, I am convinced that I was deconverting my mind from the brainwashing of Christianity at the same time, because the principles in that book are the same across any addiction. So as I was doing that, because there's so many times I was reading it, I was removing layer after layer after layer in my mind of my deep-seated roots of Christianity. by the end of it, when I quit smoking, it's just so coincidental that within that same approximate timeline is where I deconverted from Christianity. Just woke up and I was like, what am I doing? I don't want this anymore. The exact same magic that happened to me with smoking, it was just gone. Even 42 years of being a Christian, it was gone just like that. And I never looked back. And I am loving my life as an atheist. It's so amazing to be free of that brainwashing, man.
So conceptualizing belief in God as an addiction is very interesting to me, because I do see elements of that with people that I've interacted with, where they get angry and very defensive about their idea, and do everything that they verbally, physically, whatever they can to avoid learning that they're wrong. Unraveler, I think, says forbidden knowledge, this sort of thing. And it's very psychological in nature. And, I've read things like, it doesn't help when you debunk their thing. And I'm like, well, it worked on me. So, I mean, I don't know, but there's room enough for all the tactics out there. And if somebody reads this and deconverts because of it, hey, great, more power to you. I hope so. I think probably atheists will get it, because it's in, we like reading that sort of thing, I guess. But hopefully somebody will get it, and it will, it'd be like a challenge. It'd be like, hey, maybe you'll do a money back guarantee if they don't deconvert after reading your book. They can send it back and get their money back.
Yeah, right. Sure, why not?
Why not?
It's funny. I actually do prescribe a pseudo challenge in the book that I know we can't do in real life because there's no way to validate the honesty behind it. But when whoever reads the book, you'll see it. It's in there. It's a very funny and an interesting challenge. But the reason what made it so apparent to me, see, I didn't realize at the time when I woke up from Christianity and I was just done with it, that was the reason. I had to go. It was not until I was on Jennifer Fishburne's channel, Answers from Genesis, where she interviewed me and she asked me the question. She said, what made you stop believing all of a sudden? And I was like, I don't know. And I had no choice. Like I'm like that. I'm like a dog on a bone. And so I went on a journey to figure it out. And I got really back invested into all the things. I started listening to Christian music. I started listening to sermons. I started doing all this stuff that I used to do because I was like, I got to figure out what it was so great about it. What did I love about it? And what was so easy to walk away from it? And it was during that time that I started hearing music and seeing, promotions and propaganda and church marketing stuff. All this stuff kept coming back saying, I'm addicted to Jesus. I'm addicted to God, addicted to Jesus. And that's when I woke up to it. I was like, holy crap. I was like, that's it. It suddenly occurred to me, people are literally addicted to God. Like it was that simple. And I was like, and that's when I made the connection. I was like, wait a second. Is that why I woke up? I was like, maybe this is the real. If people are addicted to God, just like other addictions, maybe if I can do the same thing Alan Carr did by deprogramming them psychologically from the love they think they have for it, maybe they'll wake up. And that's the approach I took in the book. So How to Kill God the Easy Way was my first attempt at that. I have had people read it, Christians, not necessarily the really staunch, hardcore Christians that have read it. Most of them aren't even willing to read it. A couple of them have read it just for my challenge to read it. But the ones who are already having a little bit of questions, like I was as a Christian, they've deconverted. And I've got test results back from them because I have an online results form that people fill out, and they've given me back results. So over the last year that this book has been published, it's self-published, I have been getting feedback, results, editing on it as much as I could. And I'm going to be releasing a second volume of it that's far better than this one is. And it's actually divided into 2 books instead of 1. And the book's not going to be called How to Kill God the Easy Way. It's called Unravelation, How Those of Faith Find Freedom. And the reason I've changed the title is because most of the people who have read it, who have deconverted, or even have come close to deconverting, have said, man, this really helped me at least get away from the high control Christianity, for example. It does that as well, even if it doesn't deconvert you completely. They've said, I would get this book for my friends, but they won't read a book called How to Kill God. So I said, you know what? All right, I'm going to just change the title. And so I completely changed the title. And one of the other issues was the length of it. So now I have 2 books. The first one's called How Those of Faith Find Freedom. The second one is called Unravelation, but what about ... with a question mark. And every chapter in that book is just all the remaining questions you have after you read the core volume. And it's cool because I've made it like a choose your own adventure journey book. Remember when we were kids, we used to read those?
Yeah. Turn to page 45.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's that way now. So you get to a certain spot and it gives you a choice because the chapter is not essential, but if for you it's essential, you can jump there, read it, and come back. And so it does that.
Yeah.
So it's more fun to read now too. And so anyway, that right now I'm just looking for an agent because I want this book to actually be published like through an agent, through a publisher, and that kind of thing. But we'll see. It's hard to find an agent and a publisher at this point that is interested in this content. But I'm trying. Well, hopefully I can land somebody.
Yeah.
Hopefully somebody's watching your show and be like, I'm interested in it.
Yeah, I hope so. I'll be like, hey, and if so, let me know because I got like 3 books. They can publish those too because they're all print on demand. I don't get hardly anything when they sell, and
right.
And that's fine. I'm not in it for the money or whatever, but it would be nice to have it actually published so that it was, widely available or whatever, and in libraries or whatever happens when a book is published. I don't know, but I we all try to do whatever we're doing in our own unique way, and so I think what you're doing is very interesting. Looking at it as an addiction and your journey of unraveling, as you might put it, where it's literally, that over time of talking to non-theists or non-believers or whatever your preferred label is. What do you have? Do you have one, by the way? It's just like atheist, agnostic, atheist, skeptic. Yeah. Okay.
I'm an agnostic atheist.
And is the common theme has been essentially thinking your way out of it. The doing research. Looking into the matter further. There has only been one person that was due to some emotional element, which I thought was just as, because bad stuff happened to them in church, and it's like, well, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And if this thing is an addiction, people will say about religion or whatever, and I don't know how true it is that people need religion. Do you think that we humans need a secular version of religion to replace this? Do you think we need something spiritual that's not spiritual, that's just real? Or do you think that maybe some people do, but some people don't? What's your thoughts on that?
So I think obviously religious people think they need it. They specifically think they need God because you can't live without God. That's especially a Christian view. You're desperate for God. You need him. So they have this idea, which is why, I draw the parallel to it being an addiction, because you think you can't live without him. But as far as do we need that sort of a thing outside of religion, I don't. Insofar as you're not referring to religion as organized community, maybe, because I do think we need that. And I think we do have that in the world. And I think it's just, it's not as vast and as large as religion is, because they've just been doing it a long time. And because by and large, our country is raised, brainwashed to believe a God exists. I mean, if you think about it, every president's a Christian, what are the odds? Every speech ends with "In God we trust." It's on our money. Or I'm sorry, with God bless America, and the money is "In God we trust." So it's just become a part of who we are. It's just an assumed thing. People don't really question whether God exists. They just assume he is, that he does. So it's easier to get people plugged into a church because that's where God is. But I think if the church no longer existed, I think we would naturally come together and grow faster in community around other things of interest. In my book, I make a statement: as theism dies, humanism will rise. And I think that that's true. And I think the faster theism dies, the faster humanism is going to rise. And I think that that's essential, Because as long as you have people promulgating this idea that God's taking care of us, then you think that you don't need to be a part of this process that's taking care of ourselves, because this is really who we are. We have to. We've evolved, and if we want to continue to evolve, we have to take ownership. We can't sit around praying to some being that we have no reason to believe exists, and doesn't actually participate and do anything. And I know that people say, well, he worked in my life. You think he worked in your life. I simply ask you to evaluate each one of those times to ensure that there's no other possible explanation. Because here's the concern I have with what people do is, because they assume God exists and because they prayed and something happened, they make an unnecessary leap to connecting those two. And the thing is that there are several explanations probably to anything you've went through. But to just jump to God and make that assumption, that's unreasonable and illogical, especially since you have no reason to believe a God exists or that the supernatural is even there. So perhaps you should consider other possibilities that do make more sense and are rooted in the reality we live in before you just make the leap.
Yeah, I have a scenario that I use sometimes where it's like you have this intuition, feeling, thought that pops in your head. I should turn left while I'm driving. And you turn left, and then you're like, well, wait, that made no sense. I'll get back on the road. And then you look behind you and, oh, there's a crash back there that just happened. And so now you think, well, I listened to my intuition and it saved me. And you don't remember all the times that it came in your head and you didn't turn left. You don't remember the time that you turned left and nothing happened, because it's not a story. It's only a story when something happens, right? And it's like, the person said, oh, I survived this car crash. I'm like, okay, well, if you didn't survive, you'd be dead. So, how does that prove anything? You got lucky,
Right.
Right. Or the church burns down, but the Bible is intact. I'm like, well, then build the church out of Bibles. It won't burn.
Right. And the thing you need to think about when you ascribe things like that to God, as you pointed out, what about the times that it didn't happen? And most Christians will respond to that. Yeah, but that was because God was doing it and making sure it didn't happen. All glory to God, right?
Yeah, right.
No matter what it is, your answer is God. And you have to step back and say, well, you don't have to, but I recommend you step back and you say, what am I doing? Why am I ascribing everything to this God when I literally have no good reason to believe he exists?
Did you hold any point like pseudoscience, anti-science ideas during your religion period, and then learn like young Earth and then creationism, all that sort of stuff, or was that not anything that you even thought about or worried about?
At early stages, when I was still growing up Baptist with my family or whatever, young Earth creationism was a big thing. You have to believe God created it in literally 7 days. But I strayed from that fairly quickly. I didn't really have much contention with science at all. I didn't see any need for the science to compete with the Bible because I didn't think the Bible was a science book. And as a full preterist, not only did I see the ending as not about the universe, but I saw it about a nation being destroyed in 70 AD. I saw the same thing at the beginning. We called it covenant creation, that if the ending was about a destruction of a covenant, so was the beginning. And so I saw it as the creation of Israel, God's people. And so the Bible from bookends was about a nation, Israel, and out of Israel came his spiritual nation. So that was the way I saw the Bible. So I didn't have any contention with science whatsoever because I didn't even see it as a science book. But if there was any contention with science that I should have had, I wouldn't have known anyway, because I was pretty much taught that science was nothing more than the attempt to destroy God. So when I was in school growing up, I was like, oh, don't believe that evolution stuff. That's just them trying to, poison your mind. So just get the grades you have to and get out. So that's what I did. I didn't really pay much attention. So, in a lot of ways, I was very much an imbecile in the way things worked in reality, because all I ever cared about was the Bible. Everything I needed to know was in the Bible. The rest of it was just like, okay, fine. It's okay. It's great. But this is what matters in life. And so I was like an expert in nothing, except what didn't matter, this book. So, great. I could talk about the Bible. But, I don't know how useful that is. except to help you convert people. So there I am.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, that's not necessarily, I've never seen that as my personal goal per se. I just want people to use informal logic and learn it. It's like, if you deconvert, that's your journey, whatever. But and then I'm happy when people go, it's just faith. I'm like, okay, that's fine then. As long as you're not saying it's true, I'm not going to debate you. I'm not going to eat you with logic, because I don't need to. It's like, if you're just saying it's your belief, whatever, fine. But I do find it interesting, the idea of actively trying to deconvert people. I don't have an issue with that. I think, it's like I said, more power to you. The effort to get people to reason, whatever that looks like, I think that's what collectively, if you could say atheists online are doing anything collectively, that's what it seems like we're trying to do, is get people to be more reasonable and leave behind the evangelistic, anti-science stuff, and they're going to keep Christianity, at least be progressive Christians, or have less. Do you see that as well, or do you? I mean, obviously, it'd be great if everyone could just deconvert. Maybe I don't know if that would be good or not. I have no idea. It depends on the person, I suppose. There are some people that really, one belief that scares me is that you can do anything if there's no God. Well, that's true. Even if there is a God, you can still do anything. It's just, what's stopping you from doing that bad thing is yourself or the law, or and so if somebody really believes that not believing in God will make them able or allow them to do bad stuff, and then they go do that, that's scary. Like, how do we, like, that one person that exists, like, what do we do with that person? I don't know.
Right. Well, I'm an anti-theist as well, and I'm also anti-religion, predominantly because what I see happening, you've touched on a major point of it, is morality. I know the typical accusation is that atheists can't have morality because they don't have some objective standard, but the reality is it's theists that can't have objective morality, because if you're following, or you can't have morality for yourself, rather, is because if you're following some objective standard and you're saying God is the dictator of what morality is, then you're no longer a moral agent. You're just being obedient. You don't actually have any say in the matter. You don't actually have any morality for yourself whatsoever. You're just you're following the laws of a dictator. So I think that's a real danger, especially when you get to the Bible and other religious books, especially, who might even be worse than the Bible. I don't know. I mean, they're pretty comparable in their evils. But for example, slavery, I don't care who you are and how many times you try to defend God in the Bible. You absolutely 100% condone slavery, taught how to have slavery, how to do it properly, how to make sure you could beat your slaves so that they didn't die within 3 days, how to get your slaves, where to get your slaves. It is an absolute abomination in the Bible that God actually promotes and promulgates slavery. And how many Christians I have interviewed and talked to that try to defend this and say, oh, it must have been good. It must have been good if God wanted it. Because you're not thinking, you're not being a moral agent. You're just being obedient and just submitting to the rules of a dictator. And that is not morality. That is a danger to our society as a whole. So if you're going to be religious and just follow some dictator's rules, we're in trouble, because this book is from 2,000 plus years ago, and it's following ancient traditions and things that we would now in our time call evil. But you can't call it evil now because you had a God that thought it was good. So I do have a problem with religion. I have a problem with living by faith, because
absolutely,
you can believe nothing. There is nothing you can't believe if based on faith. So you can believe anything you want to. And that's dangerous, because if that poured into different parts of life, imagine what we could do with that. Well, I believe that people of other colors are not God's people. How do you know? I just take it on faith. Okay. So you can start to make anything. So I have struggles with allowing, that's why I'm where I'm at, and why I have an active goal of helping deconvert people, because I want to free them from an addiction that's not healthy for them. And I want to make sure that I live in a country and a society that's safe for all of us. because the best way that we can be moral people is to look to one another and figure out what's best for us as a society than to look at some Iron Age book.
I mean, we have each other for sure. We know that. Whether there's a God, who knows? It's remaining absolute silence. So if we can help each other in some way, shape, or form, that's something definitely worth doing. Okay, so got a couple of questions. Skeptic Philosophy says, how old were you when you left the faith? Do you think it is harder the older you get?
So here's my theory on this. I've only escaped Christianity at one age, so I can only guess on, and this is going to be based on some feedback I've gotten from people at different ages, also based on my understanding of people who have quit smoking using Alan Carr's method to deprogramming. Here's my answer. I don't think it's any harder to leave faith once the brainwashing is gone. I think it's just as easy if you're 10 as it is if you're 89. And if you've believed for 40 years, 50 years, 10 years, or 70 years, it doesn't matter. I think once that deprogramming happens and you realize you've been brainwashed, when that click happens, it's so easy to walk away. I don't think you can even consider going back. It's just not an option because you're just so free of it. What's hard, and I think is potentially harder as you get older, is realizing how much of your life you lost invested in a religion when there was no reason to, and how many things you could have experienced in your life, and those chances are gone. I can tell you myself how much I regret 42 years of life, of things that I could have enjoyed when I was younger and just didn't because I thought it was sin. Super frustrating. And I can imagine if you're 80 and you deconvert, how frustrating that would be.
Man,
so my answer.
I had a girlfriend who had an issue with kissing because it made her think things, and you're not allowed to think certain things, because God disapproves. So, yeah, without that belief, we would have had a more normal interaction as teenagers. But okay, so Objective Ethics asks, was the guest a full words I can't pronounce?
It's okay.
You can read it. I can't read it. Pertist or IBB? Did he follow the teachings of Don Person or Max King? Wow. Okay. Words. Yeah. I don't know what any of those words are, so you have to explain all of that to me.
That's okay. That's okay. Most people don't, man. Don't feel bad. IO stands for Israel only. So they're asking if I was an Israel only version of full preterism, or was I in immortal body view, or the corporate body view, which is Don Preston or Max King's positions. So I was not IO. I was in the camp of Preston and King. I was a corporate body view. And I definitely did not adhere to the IBV. I don't think the IBV has any biblical support. And I don't think IO either. I do think IO has some great arguments, and I think it can be strong at some points. But I think at the end of the day, I don't even know if they care about my reason, but I'll go ahead and give it in case someone else wants to know. At the end of the day, I think that because of the overarching theme of the Bible from beginning to end, it begins with marriage and ends. Well, it begins with betrothal and ends with marriage. That's another whole deep-seated study. But anyway, begins with marriage, ends with marriage, betrothal, marriage, whatever. Christ being the second Adam, and then the church being the second Eve. So because that's the overarching theme, and the message of the old covenant is be fruitful and multiply, because it's fulfilled spiritually, the whole goal was to be fruitful and multiply. If Christ gets married at the very end and culminates at the destruction of Jerusalem, then there's no time to have spiritual children because it all ends there. So I think it had to continue after 70 in order for people to come to faith and become spiritual children of Christ and the bride. So that was my take, and that's why I rejected IO ultimately, because I don't think you can end at 70 AD without and make Christ incapable of having children. So that was my view. So anyway, hope that helped.
Okay, were you a Calvinist? The answer, I'll answer for you, but you can answer. No, he wasn't. We covered that earlier, but he missed it. But
Yes, I was.
how close? Or you were? Were you
Yeah.
Calvinist? Okay. Oh, see,
Yeah.
I don't know. See, that's what I get for answering the question for you. Were you a Calvinist? How close were you to that? Okay,
Yes,
go ahead. I'll
I
shut
was,
up now. See,
I was a
I thought
full-blown,
you weren't. You know,
I was a 7-point Calvinist. Yes.
what is that?
7 points. They
Bringing
had
up all sorts of things I've never heard of.
at point 6, God has the right to do whatever he wants, and point 7, this is the best of all possible worlds. So yes, I was definitely a Calvinist. I was as reformed as you can get, with the added element of full preterism, which of course the Reformed camp would reject as heresy. But be that as it may, that's where I was.
So everything's been fulfilled, and also we're predestined anyway. So it's like, wow.
Yes.
Let's see. All right. Okay. Well, I think that's the weird, wacky, wild questions that the audience had come up for you, and objective ethics coming out the gate with letters and words I don't have any any familiarity with any of these teachings, but obviously you guys do. And hey, it's so funny as a skeptic. What I learn about Christianity is like, I didn't know anything about any of this stuff. I didn't even know what it was to be a Lutheran or any of the things, what it means. I don't, they don't tell you, it's so funny. And the different views like, treated as heresy. And, you wonder how many early views died because they were like, oh, heretic will just kill you, So goodness knows how early Christianity really, how without the support of the state, they would have maybe just died out.
Dude, you make a really good point that I don't think I've ever thought about till this very moment. Like one of the condemnations full preterists get a lot is because it has no history whatsoever. It's a new view, and the church could possibly missed it for this much time, 2,000 years or whatever. But the funny thing is, you just made a great point. How do we know? They could have been killed. Yeah. We have no way of knowing whether or not somebody discovered it sooner. That's an interesting thought. Yeah. Yeah, we don't.
Yeah, I mean, if it's gone, we just don't know, and what the first one was, or any of that stuff. If it wasn't considered canon or whatever when that came around, then that's another wipe of history. So you have, goodness knows, you have the early church, what little is known, and who was or wasn't accepted as a teacher, and that when they're still underground, and then all of a sudden Rome's like, oh yeah, it's the entire religion, that's the one, we're going to make them the religion. And then it's like, okay, well, now we're safe. Now it explodes, and now you've got lots of people saying different things, and goodness knows what's going on. So it's lost to history more than likely. Okay, well, I've got your links in the description, link to your channel. I'll have the link to your book in a moment there. I'll leave the last words of wisdom to you, Unraveler, and then I will be done with this for now. Hopefully we'll talk again.
I hope so too. This was fun. Hey, listen, if my new book, when I finally get that agent and we get it published, I'll let you know. We'll do this again.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That'd be fun. So right now on my channel, on the Unraveler, I have a weekly. It's a 52-week episode. 52-week series. Couldn't think of the word for a second. Look at all these big words we're using, and I can't think of the word series. That's funny. Series drops 2 times a week, Mondays and Thursdays at 4 p.m. It's called Unravelation. That's what the name of the series is, and it's about helping people who either have escaped or are considering it or whatever, some healing and how you deal with some things. So it's been a lot of fun with that series. It started at the beginning of this year. It's going to carry through December, obviously. So encourage you to check that out. And then periodically I'll do lives. Haven't done any yet this year, but hopefully we get that back up and running. And then I also do the Deconversionists. That's another channel I have on YouTube with my friend Elliot Christopherson.
Well, I have to be there.
Yeah, we'll have you on. No, we'll have you on. That'll be great. We'll have you on. And he wrote a book also called How to Stop Being a Christian. It's phenomenal. Highly recommend it. You can also find it on Amazon. Go check that out because I think you'll really enjoy it. It's really, really logical. It's a fantastic book. So that's what's going on with me right now. And I appreciate you guys being a part of this. This was a lot of fun. And Dan, thank you for having me, man. I really enjoyed this. It's a nice talk.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right, everyone. Until next time, stay skeptical. And wait, that's not how I end things. You know what? He already ended it way better than I could have. Get his book, read his book, go sub to his channel. I can't say words anymore either. We're going to end this before I get stupid. Okay.
Just say series of one.
Series. Okay. Bye, everybody. Here, stick around for a moment here. Okay. And